Well, so you have to go back. You have to go back in history prior to this law, which was passed in and signed into law in 1974. And why did the Congress feel like it needed to pass the Impoundment Control Act? It was basically because President Nixon, who had an expansive view of executive power, one that should be familiar to us because it's sort of similar to the view of the Trump administration. And President Nixon basically, had the habit of uh, not spending money for programs that he didn't agree with. So the Congress would pass an appropriation and the president would sign it into law. So this was, these were actual laws. And the president would sort of pick and choose which ones he wanted to spend money on and which ones he didn't. And it was basically based on, sort of ideological or political considerations. And there were court cases that were associated with this, and the courts consistently found that the president doesn't get to pick and choose which programs he spends money on and which programs he doesn't spend money on. And in fact, interestingly, even in his own Justice Department, William Rehnquist, who at that point was in the Nixon Justice Department, eventually became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, wrote a memo that basically said, I'm paraphrasing, I can't find any basis on which to say that the president can refuse to spend money that's been appropriated by Congress. So, so this was sort of illegal, right? But then it also made the Congress mad. And the Congress in 1974, largely in response to Nixon, decided to kind of reassert its role in the congressional budget process. And so it passed a law called the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act, which created the budget committees, created the budget resolution. It created CBO, which we'll talk about later. But it also had this section about impoundment control. And it essentially said that the president can request the Congress to cancel an appropriation or to defer spending. But unless the president does that and the Congress approves it, then the president has no legal authority to sort of unilaterally refuse to spend money.